NASCAR might technically be a team sport, but the drivers don't have any teammates when they're behind the wheel. Sure, they have organizational teammates, but they're essentially just coworkers sharing a racetrack at 200 miles per hour. Each driver gets their own points, their own finishes, and it is entirely up to them when they're behind the wheel to get their own results. But for a brief stint in NASCAR history, teamwork was the most important part of racing. I'm talking about the tandem era. This is the story of tandem drafting, the story of driver-to-driver radios, and the story of one of the greatest finishes in all of NASCAR history. This is the story of the 2011 Aaron's 499 at Talladega. Although NASCAR isn't especially known for drivers looking out for one another on the track, super speedways have often thrown a wrench into things. OEMs try to keep their cars together on the track. Fords work with Fords, Chevy with Chevy, and Toyota with Toyota. All of this is done to try to give the manufacturer the best chance at victory. This all sounds good in theory until you put human beings in the car who are all making split-second decisions at 200 miles per hour, all while trying to put themselves in the best position to win. Sometimes the OEMs get lucky, and other times they end up pushing their rival to the victory. The art of teamwork in NASCAR only truly works with loyal teammates who have nothing to lose, while the other driver has everything to gain. In a sport that values winning and success above anything else, teamwork typically falls to the wayside. The weird thing about NASCAR, though, is that every so often something will come along and completely change the way we know the sport. Well, that happened when NASCAR introduced the COT. NASCAR drivers were soon figuring out that this car had a very big advantage if used correctly: bump drafting. The flat bumper design on the COT was suddenly allowing drivers to push for much longer than in previous car generations, where it was pretty easy to turn somebody if something went wrong. These prolonged bump drafts allow drivers to pull away from the pack due to the speed advantages they were able to generate. This would come to be known as tandem drafting. If you want to know more, the Iceberg has a great video about the history of this, so go watch that. To understand just how powerful the tandem draft truly was, let's look at the 2009 Talladega finish. Carl Edwards is running in 8th place with 3 laps to go, last in the single file line of leaders. By the last lap, he and Keselowski were taking the lead. By the following year, everybody and their brother in the field had taken note of this, and ensued one of the most competitive races in NASCAR history. In 2010, the tandem draft was more prevalent than ever, but the field still hadn't completely abandoned pack racing for most of the day. Guys would use the tandem to slingshot up to the front of the field. By the end of the race, though, everybody was tandeming.
We'll try to make the move, although I don't know if it'll do him any good or not.
Last chance through the trial.
Here he comes! Here he comes!
Here they come!
Harvick! It's Harvick! He got him! He timed it perfect!
Harvick essentially pulled a bump and run at 200 miles per hour to take the win. Tandem drafting would certainly be here to stay, and it would be just as prominent in the fall race. But our story really picks up in the following year at Daytona.
As a country music singer, I'm so proud to share the greatest fan base in the world with NASCAR.
The 2011 Daytona 500 was one for the ages, and will probably get one of its own videos here at some point. The track was repaved in the offseason, and that meant drivers were now able to tandem draft at Daytona. The main difference between Daytona and Talladega, besides distance, is that Daytona is significantly more narrow than Talladega. This naturally led to drivers running out of room while they were trying to figure out the new style of racing, and a record 16 cautions flew before the day was over. Everybody remembers this race, though, for perhaps the biggest Cinderella story in all of NASCAR history. 20-year-old Trevor Bayne, in only his second career start, would take the Wood Brothers 21 car to victory lane. If this race was any indicator, it certainly looked like 2011 was going to be a great year for superspeedway racing. And when NASCAR rolled into Talladega a few months later, every expectation would be exceeded. It's quite possible that Talladega, Alabama is the most American place in the country. Tens of thousands of race fans gather in the infield for the greatest party in all of NASCAR every April and October. But this time they were in for something special. NASCAR's newest spectacle of tandem drafting was reaching its peak. and it would never get better than this. If the nationwide race the day before had taught us anything, it was going to be a special race. Kyle Busch won because of course he did, as Mike Wallace flipped down the backstretch, only to drive away. We were going to be in for a show on Sunday. Let's go upstairs to Mike Joy.
This is the most unpredictable venue in all of stock car racing, and it has been since they opened it in 1969. 10 drivers have scored their first ever Sprint Cup win here.
Hendrick Motorsports rolled off top 4, only the third time a team has ever done that in NASCAR history, with Jeff Gordon taking the 70th pole of his career. 5-time defending champion Jimmy Johnson started alongside of him and was winless on the season coming into today. While he was not exactly known for his super speedway talent, he had a good chance of breaking through. The same can be said for Dale Earnhardt Jr., as he was still trying to win his first race since 2008. He was off to a good start in 2011, and with Talladega being one of his best tracks, it looked like today could be the day. And who could forget Mark Martin, the driver of the 5 car who had plans to work in tandem with Gordon throughout the day. Behind the first 4 was a field full of storylines. David Reagan, rolling off in row 4, would look for redemption after his Daytona 500 blunder. Clint Bowyer was in row 5 trying to win his second Talladega race in a row. And in row 6, Trevor Bayne was back on the high banks of a super speedway, and Michael Waltrip was repping an Auburn car. The Fox booth naturally picked Bayne to be the guy to talk to before the green flag, and they also talked to Clint Bowyer. Let's let DW take us to the green flag.
Big race fans, it's DW. It's a beautiful day for racing. Let's crank it up and hit the road.
Get ready for 188 laps of hold your breath.
Boogity, boogity, boogity! This is Talladega, boys! Let's go racing!
And they were off. Lap 1 would barely go to Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin, as the Hendrick guys would drive away as everybody else shuffled to find a partner. By lap 4, most guys were linked up and the race was underway. A lap later, Bowyer and Mikey took the lead, only to get disconnected in turn 1 and lose all their ground. When Fox cuts back from commercial on lap 13, Gordon and Martin had already fallen outside the top 20. This is a prime example of how different this type of racing was. You could essentially run anywhere in the pack whenever you wanted, based on how aggressive you were willing to be and when you felt it was the time to move. Stages in the middle of races weren't a thing yet, so there was no incentive for drivers to be at the front for the entire race. You were able to take a nice Sunday drive in the back if you really wanted to. By lap 14, Junior and Johnson had made their way back to the lead. Tandem drafting also gave drivers a unique obstacle in the fact that every now and then, they would have to switch who was the lead car and who was the pusher. The exchange, as it was called, would cause the pair to run significantly slower for a lap or two as they regrouped and got going again. As the race progressed, the exchange and the strategy behind it would become an important factor. Early into this race, it seemed like anybody could run at the front. Busch and Logano up from outside the top 30, David Reagan looking for another chance to win, rookie Landon Castle, even the Red Bull cars were looking good.
Around goes Vickers, and caution waves.
Brian Vickers would bring out the first caution after Landon Castle was turned into him. For Talladega, a single car crash was almost unheard of, but this new type of drafting allowed all the cars behind the crash to navigate their way through without any major incident. They restart on lap 32, and this time Bowyer isn't being pushed by Michael Waltrip, but now he's found his teammate in Jeff Burton. A couple laps later, Matt Kenseth takes the lead, pushed by David Reagan, and then here comes Kyle Busch and Joey Logano. The battle was on again.
Trevor Bayne driving for the Wood Brothers, the Daytona 500 winner. Pardon me, coming through. He and Greg Biffle.
Trevor Bayne was moving to the front, showing his Daytona 500 win might not have been a fluke after all. He's not the only underdog in this, though. Regan Smith and Paul Menard are having a very strong day, as well as David Reagan. On the other end of things, though, hanging in the back are Tony Stewart, Kevin Harvick, and the fastest cars of the weekend, Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin. It's still early in the race, and they've decided there's nowhere to be just yet. Something I haven't mentioned yet about the tandem era is the fact that drivers were able to dial up one another on the radio. Have a listen to Dale Jr. and Jimmy Johnson as they talked about strategy mid-race.
Let's not get too far back. Getting that wide. This is a good spot.
I'm just gonna hold one up and see where I can go. Let's go.
Yeah, too far. I'll follow you.
Some laps later, Fox cuts back from commercial and the pair is back at the front. On lap 54, we get a glimpse into the future.
Ooh, 3 wide. Kenseth up the middle. And the leader is Kenseth. Half a car length.
I know we've got 134 laps to go, but don't be surprised that that's not the way this race ends in 134 laps.
Dale Jr. comes around a lap later to lead with a standing ovation from the crowd. A few laps later, Daytona 500 winner Trevor Bayne takes the lead. The 4 pairs in frame here seem to be the strongest contenders early, but also keep in mind these are really the only guys who are trying. Plenty of guys are just hanging out in the back. Green flag pit stops are now underway around lap 70, and Trevor Bayne has trouble on pit road, which would cost him and partner Greg Biffle all their track position, who also had a slow stop. Dale Jr. and Jimmy Johnson cycle back to the lead. In the back, Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin are almost a half a lap behind them, in no hurry whatsoever with still over 100 laps to go. Ryan Newman was now up front with his new partner Kyle Busch after Busch didn't cycle out with Logano.
Trouble, turn 3, Mike, sorry. Cars around everywhere.
3, 4 against the wall and sliding down to the inside.
On lap 90, 5 cars would crash in turn 3. Brad Keselowski was turned off the bumper of his teammate Kurt Busch and collected a few others. Casey Kane's car was cooked. Marcus Ambrose was wrecked. David Reagan's redemption story had come to an end, and Trevor Bayne's slow pit stop put him in the middle of all that mess. He would not have had a chance to repeat what he accomplished at Daytona. A whole lot of good cars torn up, and as Mike Joyce said, a lot of dreams went up into that fence. The next restart saw Paul Menard lead the field to green, but it would be the duo of Bowyer and Burton who would take off. Behind them, the Busch brothers were working together now. How cute. Now Kyle was joined by his 2 Joe Gibbs Racing teammates at the front. Out of nowhere though, it would be Kevin Harvick pushing Dave Blaney to lead the 100th lap.
Hey, Mike.
Where'd he come from?
So now that it's lap 100, where's the pair that led the field to green way back on lap 1?
And the pair at the very back of this group, I mean the way back of this group, is your Pizza Hut fan favorite, Jeff Gordon. Back there with Mark Martin, sticking to the plan, the old married couple. They're not up front speed dating, they're just riding along. 29th, 30th, 6.5 seconds off the lead.
Junior and Johnson are also hanging out in the back, all biding their time. The front was just a little too busy for them at this stage of the race. Bowyer and Burton found themselves back in the lead, and were having a little fun over the radio.
I tell you what, we're faster with you pushing. But they get on with it. I'm going, damn it.
We all know that Talladega is a wild card race, but how about this? Listen to the story of the driver currently running third.
Is there anybody in the field that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, J.J. Yaley, he's running third. He didn't even start this race. Bill Elliott started the 46. Yaley climbed aboard on one of the cautions, and here he is running third.
Being pushed by Terry Labonte, 2-time Sprint Cup Series champion.
Bowyer with Burton and the Busch brothers were some of the strongest drivers all day, and were making a strong case that they were going to be there at the end. They'd still have to compete with the dominant Hendrick cars who were lurking in the back though. The third caution would come with 61 laps to go for debris in turn 3, and there would be a restart, bunching everybody back up again.
Thanks, Chris. Brad Paisley among those watching today, and he tweets, I haven't seen this much adolescent bumping and grinding since the prom.
Brad's my neighbor.
Back underway, and the underdogs are prevailing again. Dave Blaney is cooking in that Golden Corral car, and he's been working with Kevin Harvick all race. We'd get another classic soundbite gem.
I have nightmares tonight about kids eating free.
Back on the restart, Kyle Busch lost his brother and would get reacquainted with teammate Joey Logano, a decision that would ultimately end in disaster a few laps later. Kyle Busch's great run would ultimately go up in smoke, collecting Kenseth and AJ. The field restarts with 45 laps to go, with all 4 Richard Childress Racing drivers in the top 4. The 2 2010 winners, Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick, find themselves paired up, and other guys that have been hanging out in the back all day were suddenly working their way to the front. It was getting down to crunch time, and it was time to go.
Here comes Truex, 4 wide. Martin Truex may lead this lap. No, he does, and Burton hangs on.
He saved it.
Things were getting crazy. Meanwhile, for the first time since the beginning of the race, Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin were in the same frame as the leaders, inching ever so closer, with Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. right behind them. At the front, Michael Waltrip Racing was back, this time with Martin Truex Jr. and David Rudiman. We return from commercial break to the 5th caution of the day for debris down the backstretch. This sets up a restart with 22 laps to go. Bowyer and Burton are reunited and take off. A lap later, they are caught by Smith and Menard and Montoya and McMurray. Soon everybody was at the front, and we avoided what could have just been a much bigger disaster.
Whoa, no!
Newman saves it.
They all saved it. Murray's still on the apron.
Unbelievable.
Talk about a wheel, man. And the craziest part, just like Mike Wallace the day before, Newman carries on. There wasn't even a caution. He just kept it going inside the top 10. And did you notice that? Yeah, they're here. The Sunday drive was over. Just after Ryan Newman seemed to get away with one, he was turned going down the backstretch. Montoya also had big trouble. Jimmy Johnson and Dale Jr. were almost involved in this on their way towards the front. This was the 6th and final caution of the day, and the race was on with 12 to go, with Dave Blaney leading the field to green. Immediately, Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin pounce, but it's Harvick and Bowyer who would lead the field around with 10 laps to go. Now Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. were back in it too, and it would be a battle of the best cars all day to decide the winner. Once again, Dave Blaney would make his way to the front, pushed by Kurt Busch this time. Coming to 6 to go, Bowyer and Harvick decide to make a swap, feeling that they run much faster when Bowyer is the leader and Harvick is the pusher. They lost a lot of ground and don't have much time to make it up. Down the backstretch, Carl Edwards and Greg Biffle come into the picture. Dave Blaney sits in the lead with 5 to go, trying to get Tommy Baldwin Racing their first ever win. It was not meant to be though, after Blaney and Kurt Busch got disconnected in turn 2, losing all of their momentum. 4 to go, Edwards and Biffle lead with Gordon and Martin hot on their tail, and Bowyer had made his way back up to the front, now being pushed by Kevin Harvick. In turn 3, heartbreak strikes once again at the hands of Kurt Busch. Now it's 3 to go. Bowyer and Harvick are scooting away, and it's starting to look like a 4-car race as the Hendrick cars are stuck in traffic. 2 laps to go. Edwards and Biffle have got the lead, and the Gordon-Martin duo are free of the pack. Bowyer and Harvick make the pass off turn 2, but Roush fights back down the backstretch. All this battling brings the Gordon and Martin right back into it with a full head of steam. Johnson and Jr. have closed in as well. Gordon takes the white flag. After running in the back all day, it was finally paycheck time. Heading down the backstretch, Bowyer goes to the outside and Johnson closes in. Out of turn 4, Jimmy Johnson and Dale Jr. pick up the draft from the RCR pair. Johnson has to decide which way to go, and after Bowyer swings high to block the top lane, Johnson has no choice but to dart low. Gordon and Martin left the bottom lane open. Martin swings down, but it's too late, and Johnson races by, and he and Gordon get disconnected. Charging towards the checkered flag at 200 miles per hour are 4 pairs of cars, 3 of which are locked in tandem, letting nothing more than speed and momentum decide the outcome. I think you know what happens next.
3 by 3 to the line. Johnson. Maybe Jimmy Johnson. I believe he got him by an inch.
2/1000ths of a second he beat Bowyer.
Okay, a 16th of an inch.
Have you ever?
Oh, man. Oh, man.
No, we have
Never seen anything like that.
That's how you do teammates, man. Go up and congratulate them. Both y'all won that race. Both y'all.
Jimmy Johnson doesn't win this race without Dale Jr.'s push from heaven, and Jeff Gordon doesn't lose this race if he and Mark Martin don't get disconnected. If Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick had just a skosh more momentum, Clint would have had 3 Talladega wins in a row. For the couple years that super speedways were tandem tracks, teamwork was everything. This was the greatest and final, truly spectacular race of the tandem drafting era, and it was all downhill from here. The July Daytona race created dislike for it, and by 2012, tandem drafting was outlawed altogether. But even years later, the tandem draft would still appear from time to time, mostly from those who seemed to love it the most. I'd just like to say there's no way this finish happens in modern day, even if they were racing the Gen 5. With the drivers we have now, they would have all wadded up in the tri-oval. But that's what makes this race so special. It's etched into the perfect time of NASCAR history, where the sport needed something different during the COT era. Drivers weren't too aggressive, but just enough to make this one of the greatest spectacles in auto racing. The names at the front, the unpredictability, the slingshot moves, the high-speed battles, and of course, the finish, all make this one of NASCAR's greatest races of all time. Thank you for watching.